zany.
Video gamey.
Animaniacs, those are the best.
If you were to ask any nice kid what their favorite show was, chances are you'd hear Animaniacs. The show launched on September 13th, 1993, and it would become one of the biggest cartoons of the 90s. It was one of the most watched shows on Fox Kids, then Kids WB.
Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday we've something for you. It's Yakko and Wakko and Dot and the Doctor and Mindy and Buttons and Boo. Skullhead and Rita and Skippy and Pinky and Ralph and Minerva and mine. This week on TV on Kids WB, Animaniacs all of the time. It's Animaniacs week starting Monday on Kids WB.
It was a fun variety show that starred Slappy Squirrel, Chicken Boo, Rita and Run, The Goodfeathers, Buns and Mindy, Pinky and the Brain, and of course, our lovable trio, Yakko, Wakko, and
Princess Angelina, Contessa, Louisa, Francesca, Banana, Fana, Bobeska, the third. Tee-hee.
the cartoon was a fun throwback to the golden age of animation with its zany slapstick and orchestrated score. It drew heavily from cartoonists such as Tex Avery, Chuck Jones, and Bob Clampett. The show lasted for quite some time, spanning 99 episodes. It would be cancelled on November 14th, 1998, but a movie came out a year later. The Warners did have a little trouble getting the film funded.
We want to make a movie.
You can't make a movie.
We want to make a movie.
You can't make a movie.
We want to make a movie.
You can't make a movie.
That was pretty much it. For a full half hour.
It was Wakko's wish, and as far as grand finales go, it wasn't exactly the ideal ending for the series. The movie was surprisingly syrupy, and it featured too little of the trademark Animaniacs slapstick. It really pushed for the sort of sentimentality you expect from a Disney film, not a Warner Brothers production. For a time, this would be the last people would see of Animaniacs. That is, until 2020 when Animaniacs was revived by Hulu. Good idea. Bringing back the Animaniacs show. Bad idea. Not bringing back the variety. Yeah, it was great that the show came back, but it came at a cost. For the reboot, they decided to focus mainly on the Warner siblings, as well as Pinky and the Brain. So that meant that fan favorites like Slappy, The Goodfeathers, and Rita and Runt were kicked to the curb. The only exception to that was the infamous Chicken Boo episode where they appeared in a non-speaking cameo. I'm not entirely sure why most of the cast were cut out, but I think it had to do with the show's limited budget. Obviously, the more characters you use in a script, the more voice actors you have to pay. To be fair, they brought back the characters people love most about the show. The Warner siblings were always a hoot, and the songs they sang were fun, memorable, and educational. And there was just something so endearing about watching two mice trying to take over the world, yet having no chance of doing so. As I look back on old episodes of Animaniacs, even I have to admit that the show's humor was kind of hit or miss. The Warner siblings got me to laugh quite a lot with their silly antics and clever innuendos. But some of the skits really weren't all that funny, like the hippos for instance. They were so lame that even series creator Tom Ruegger admitted they should have no part in a reboot. I liked Chicken Boo as a kid, and I still kind of do, but as you get older, you realize his shtick relies on only one joke. He's a chicken in obviously poor disguise. And it's a repetitive joke at that. You can see why he only appears one episode per season in the reboot. The Buns and Minnie episodes are also tedious, even though they were mindful to change the settings. This was one of the worst segments as Minnie appears so unlikable, getting the poor dog into scraps. Making it worse was the fact the horribly neglectful parents would always chide Buns, making you pity the poor creature rather than laugh at him. You just want Buns to get sick of these idiots and bite them in the butt. Now, I can remember watching The Goodfeathers as far back as I can remember, and they were merely okay. They weren't the funniest characters, but they had their moments. But I doubt that many kids appreciated the Goodfellas references. Katie Kaboom explored the concept of a teenage girl hulking out, and her exploits seemed more horrific than comedic. As for Minerva Mink, she was a little too racy for a kid's show, so she didn't last beyond 2 episodes. Slappy was one of the more popular skits as she and her nephew Skippy would get into all sorts of escapades. I never found her quite as good as the Warner siblings or the Pinky and the Brain segments, but she did have some funny one-liners.
But Aunt Slappy, how'd you know I wasn't dead?
Skippy, how many times do I have to tell you? There's no dying in the world of cartoons. Well, bonkers.
Ooh, you're gonna need some water for that sick burn, Bonkers. As for Rita and Runt, their segments focus more on songs than zany antics. I personally didn't find the songs to be all that memorable, as nothing they sang managed to equal Yakko's World or Wakko's America. The show enjoyed its golden run in the first few seasons, but the quality started tapering off slowly and surely. Pinky and the Brain went to star in their own spin-off series that lasted from 1995 to 1998. Seeing they now had their own show, they began appearing less and less in Animaniacs. At this point, it would have been too redundant to have Pinky and the Brain in Animaniacs, so they would be sidelined by the other characters. Sure, they still appear in some later segments, but those were few and far between. With our lovable mice gone, it was up to Slappy, Buns, Mindy, and the Goodfeathers to fill the void. The problem is that the Goodfeathers were always pretty one-note, and Goodfellas references weren't anything new even when the show debuted. The creators devoted one episode mostly to them, only to never do it again. By the end of the show's run, they started appearing less, and were mostly relegated to cameo appearances. They would always do this thing where Squid would say something, and Pesto would misconstrue it, lashing out violently at him. In the final seasons, you could tell that even the show's creators were tired of them, as Bobby would just sigh at seeing Pesto beat up Squid. I also get the feeling that the show's budget was running out in the later episodes, as the Rita and Runt skits were abandoned. I guess WB couldn't afford Rita's voice actor Bernadette Peters, although she would return for Wakko's Wish. At best, they would make brief appearances. As for Buns and Mindy, they eventually disappeared too. Considering the repetitive nature of their skits, do you really need to ask why? So this mostly left the show in the hands of the Warner siblings, with a fair bit given to Slappy Squirrel. They did create an entire episode centered on Slappy, but in a strange bit of writing, they decided to go for pathos. In it, Slappy goes crazy, and Skippy has to check her into the mental institution. I can't help but wonder if they were using this episode as a pilot to test an eventual Slappy Squirrel spinoff. If that's the case, then it clearly didn't work as the Slappy segments aren't strong enough to sustain 22 minutes. So in the end, it was mostly up to the Warner siblings to do the heavy lifting. As I look back on the original show, it's starting to become obvious why they decided to just focus on the Warners and Pinky and the Brain. The Goodfeathers are dated, Buns and Mindy is too monotonous, the Hippos suck, Rita and Runt were never all that funny, Katie Kaboom is unlikable, and Minerva Mink is too politically incorrect by today's standards. Still, at the very least, they should have brought back Slappy Squirrel as she and her nephew make up the third most popular part of the show. Having at least 3 main sketches would have balanced out the show better. Instead, you get 2 Warner's cartoons and 1 Pinky and the Brain cartoon per episode. Don't get me wrong, I love the Warners and those 2 little rodents, but the original show thrived on variety. Even if it showed a character you didn't like, every episode was bound to have something that amused you. But in the Animaniacs reboot, having just 2 main segments feels wrong, stripping away a large part that made the original so appealing. The show needed that variety to keep things fresh, yet even by the end of the show's original run, it lost that as well. Now, it's not to say that I hate the reboot. It has some of the best songs of the series, and I love seeing the Warners tackle more modern stuff like social media, streaming services, and Hollywood reboots. The Jurassic Park parody is absolutely perfect, and one of my favorite moments from the series. The Pinky and the Brain segments are as good as ever, and I would consider them the highlight of the reboot. However, I would still like to see a bit more of the original show's variety. The reboot has been renewed for a 3rd season, and I have a few ideas how they can improve it. For one, they should bring back some of the original cast for old time's sake. From day one, it was obvious that the Warners and the Roans would return. Let's be real, they can't get rid of the Warners since they're the heart and soul of the franchise. Not to mention the face. As for Pinky and the Brain, they made up some of the best parts of the original show, so getting rid of them would be suicide. Yet the reboot's executives didn't think the rest of the cast was worth keeping, so that's a bit of a shame. If there is one old-timey character they should revive, it's Slappy Squirrel. She's one of the more recognizable characters from the show, and leaving her out in the 3rd season would be a huge mistake. In the last season of the original show, most of the characters were reduced to cameos, yet she still starred in her own cartoons to the bitter end. Besides, It would be fun to see her own sardonic take on the modern world. Not only that, but having at least 3 main segments would help keep the show from feeling tedious. As for the Goodfeathers or Rita and Run, they could appear in at least a couple of episodes, or maybe even a cameo. I know that Pesto's voice actor Chick Venera is dead, but there's a good chance he might have voiced him prior to his passing. If so, it would be nice to devote an episode to his legacy. However, the 3rd season shouldn't be too reliant on bringing back old characters. Let's face it, the Goodfeathers and the Hippos aren't as timeless as Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, or Porky Pig. What they should also do is bring new characters into the show. Even before I saw the Animaniacs reboot, I felt that they should focus on bringing us a new cast, along with the Warners and Pinky and the Brain. Funny characters with their unique brand of comedy, their own running gags, and so on. Instead, we got a gnome that lives in people's mouths. I didn't hate it, but in the few times they appeared, he failed to make me laugh. The Cindy and Starbucks shorts fare better as they feel like an improved version of Buns and Mindy. Unlike Buns, the alien who gets abused totally deserves it for trying to consume the Earth. Still, this sketch only appears once per season, so that's not much to go on. What's funny is that the reboot did poke fun at the idea of creating new characters, like the social butterfly. I can actually see Mime and Meme working in 10-second spurts, but who can say no to Aqua Claus? The reason why people remember the Warners and the Roans is because they have strong personalities and they play off each other brilliantly. Their characters are more flexible. In one instance, the Warners would defy authority, while in the other, they would sing an educational song about exoplanets. In one skit, Pinky and the Brain will try to take over the world, yet in another, they can make something so mundane as celebrating Pinky's birthday so entertaining. That's the sort of flexibility you can't get with a gnome, or Buns and Mindy. I like to see stronger characters in the 3rd season, so it annoys me that the creators dove in without a plan to make new characters. I would love to see a shining new cast, the Looney Tunes of the 21st century, but unfortunately, we haven't gotten that. Aside from bringing back the original show's variety, they need to make a sketch where they make fun of SpongeBob, and I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way, just a playful mocking. I mean, the show has been around forever, so it would be a perfect target for Animaniacs to parody. Hey, they parodied Rugrats, so why not this? Of course, they need to make fun of more Disney stuff. Some of the best Animaniacs skits involve taking a poke at Disney, like Cutie and the Beast and the Tiger Prince. Come on, there's so much stuff to make fun of, like Disney's acquisition of every company, their constant insistence on live-action remakes, and their most recent shows like DuckTales. Which I like, by the way. Ben Schwartz is awesome as always. You know how in the original show, the cast would pop out of the water tower in the show's closing credits? They would often have something amusing to say, so I like to see that return. Unfortunately, we live in an era where we're expected to binge-watch our shows, so everyone is accustomed to pressing that skip button. So maybe that's why they no longer do the end credits gags. Still, they should include them anyway, as I always like those gags, even if they are filler. And they definitely need to revive Good Idea, Bad Idea. Come on, there are endless possibilities for this. As usual, we're going to need more of the killer songs and educational bits the series is known for. And bring back the Wheel of Morality. And of course, we need to find out what's to become of Warner Bros. Now that Ralph is chairman. Will he bring the Warner lot to ruins? Well, in the original Animaniacs show, the Warners own most of Warner Bros. Stock, so they can kick him out if anything goes wrong. So, what would you like to see in the 3rd season of Animaniacs? Would you rather see new characters or old? Would you like to see more Disney ribbing? Please be sure to let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that anvil. Or rather, hit that bell.